So thank you, Angela. We can share the microphone because I've got the clips one, so it's easier for everybody to interact. What about the afternoon? Feel free to interact. We hope that you will do, of course. The more you do, the better, because this is your turn to to say your opinion and also to ask questions. So welcome also to people who are connected via streaming. I've got 2 slides, very simple, because this is not the time to show other slides and to talk on them. It's a time to interact, and feel free to raise your hand and to grasp the microphone and to add some new topics to our discussion. In our opinion, it's important in this wrap up to remember the 3 milestones of the project. The first one is this one, the definition of common KPIs, and to deliver a first version of a dataset structure and work on it in the way he explained, Fabio, and to gain some data collection strategies in order to harmonize, organize all the information we will be able to collect and to share together. This is the first milestone. The second one is the use of this data set, so the observatory, through the digital platform, we know, and we were so inspired by the videos and the examples you provided, Fabio. And the third milestone is about promotion and dissemination inside the FEBA network and outside, of course. This is a very important thing. Once again, we can see a sequence, but at the same time, while we are reasoning on the KPIs, at the same time, we are also trying to imagine the shape of the observatory and the use and the situations in which it might be useful in terms of communication strategies, reputation strategies, and so on. So they work together, these 3 milestones. But in any case, let's concentrate, because it's a very large effort. Let's concentrate on the first milestone. That's why I ask you to start a discussion reading these sentences. Set the goals, think about the indicators for each area. Can you remember that Angela, at the beginning of the morning, talked about 4 areas referring to the impacts of your daily life, of what food banks do? So the economic impact, the environmental one, the social, and the nutritional one. And so that's why we are keeping these 4 areas like a frame. And inside, I would like to propose a sort of table. Here you can see the 4, Fabio, the 4 areas, of course, economic, environmental, nutritional, and social. For the moment, it's important to say goodbye and good luck at the end of the afternoon, having tried at least to fill in all the blank cells, let's say so. And so we can start listing all the KPIs, indicators, and measures you already use. This could be a first round of discussion, and on that, reason on the, let's say so, positive points, criticalities, bottlenecks in each sense, in the sense of how you use them, how you collect them, if in your country there are different methods, if between countries there are some specific difficulties, and so on. This is important for us because it's the state of the art. So as is the situation right now. It will be our starting point. And the very first starting point, I think, can be the Excel file you already share for your annual survey, in which you fill in with numbers, measures, and so on. This is a very starting point, but from that we can proceed and reason on these 4 areas. What are the expectations on this discussion? Different. First of all, might be that we might discover that, for example, one or more area are very well covered with KPIs, while others are totally blank, void, or with very few or very critical indicators. This might be one result. A second result is to discover if there are some differences, deep or light differences, between the how you produce data, thinking about these 4 areas. And the third, let's hope so, let's cross our fingers, is that you feel more engaged to work and to proceed on, with us on this project. So this is our expectation for the moment, of course, and with the selected partners, members of the pilot group, we will get into more detail after discussing with you. But you are, let's say so, the starter of the process. So that's why I thank you very much, because this discussion is key for us. It's a really, really first step we do together with you. So thank you very much. Okay. If I may, I will sit. I will pass your microphone. The microphone. I will. I was thinking about the API. That's why Microsoft. I will write Fabio also in a more interactive way. So this is a typical situation of a focus group. I would say in a qualitative research approach. But in general terms, let's discuss together. Okay, let's discuss together. Right. So, first point, as is, the situation as is. Let's start, can you remember vaguely the Excel file you've got in your hands when you have to fill in the survey Angela sends you? Can you see it? Do you have it, or can we share in some way? Maybe
we will print some copies.
Okay. Thank you very much. I've got one copy here. Okay. Very small printed, so okay. Right. Okay. You see, this is a detailed file, and then we can aggregate the numbers into this one. Is it correct? Should we have it? Okay, maybe.
We will print some copies. So
okay, we are going to print some copies. Okay. Yes. Just remembering this type of file, probably once we have the copies, it's better. Probably we can also already identify some important KPIs referred to the economic, financials, I would say, environmental, nutritional. I'm not so sure for the moment, but who knows? And social impact. So a first round would be this one. Do you find that for the moment, for the survey you fill in on a yearly basis, that these 4 areas are well represented? Can you identify some KPIs for each area, starting from this? I will bring you a copy. Yes, no, why? Okay.
Sorry, I'm not coming from Italy. So I have the feeling that the economic, nutritional, possibly social impact are plus minus numbered, and these data
that is reliable, or depending if everybody has got the same definition. For example, what is a beneficiary? That's already a big issue.
Okay.
That's for social. Nutritional, I'm not so sure about the basis for documenting the nutritional aspects, but more or less I think everybody is thinking in the same direction. How many proteins, how many fresh food, how many fruit, how many vegetables, and things like that. I think the environmental one is the one that is really missed. That is really, really missed. And I don't necessarily would like to plead guilty or not guilty about this. I think it is mainly due to the mainly due to the fact that there is no methodology that is approved even between banks of the same country. I think this is a big problem. So there is a need to define a methodology, although in my opinion, for the environmental impact, it is necessary to demonstrate that we have, hopefully, a positive environmental impact. But I don't think it is required that we measure it to the finest T. Economic, what is economic impact? It is so vague, it's so vast.
Yes, it's very large.
So,
yes.
You know, but I wasn't here this morning, so maybe you covered this already, and so. But it is so wide that it's different. Is it the economics of food banking? Is it the economic in society because of our action? What does it, I mean, how do you, is it dynamic economics or is it just hard numbers? I don't know. So for me, I think it needs more definition.
Yes.
Okay, now I think I've spoken already enough for the afternoon.
No, it's a really interesting. First of all, what did you think about his intervention? I find it very inspiring and useful, and also provoking in a constructive way, and that's what we need in this discussion, to feel provoked and to react. Starting from our country, from our personal experience, and with concrete examples, if possible, of course. Yes, the economic impact is something huge. I would start from your Excel file, because in this one you've got some data about the economic financials and so on. And the first, I react with a question, not because I want to be unpolite, but because I want to get into detail with what you said. And is it sufficient, what you already have in terms of economics, I would say? Is it sufficient? And tomorrow we reasoned about the relationships between the choice of the KPIs, of the indicators of data in general terms, and the goals you've got in mind. Because depending on the goals you set and the objectives you want to reach, you will look for specific indicators. So in general terms, many indicators might be interesting, even though we are only speaking about economics. But what types of economic metrics do we need to do what we are doing, to do what we do? So the relationship is between, of course, the type of impact we want to produce, bearing in mind the goals. And this morning we saw 3 examples. The first one was about electric vehicles and so on. So counting the number of vehicles, the car fleets and so on per food bank might be useless in general terms, but might be key if we have in mind some specific collaborations. For example, it was the case of Volkswagen and electrical vehicles and so on. The same for social, demographic info, so data, age, sex, nationality, income, household composition and so on. When thinking about aging society and looking for funding opportunities referred to this huge and increasing part of the population, as you know. The same for child poverty. So bearing in mind the goal, we might select some specific indicators. So for the moment, the first question, oh, the copies have arrived, wonderful, nice. So we can share. We can start right from this type of document and reason on the gaps, if there are any, on the criticalities when filling in what already exists and imagining what else we might add to this list. Okay? So now we can share it and have a look to it.
Can I add something
Yes,
to Jacques?
course.
So Etienne Rubens, Belgian Federation. He was just first because I had the same remark. That's at a glance, or in the few previous weeks since I worked at a federation. I also observed that indeed we are not speaking about, for example, the number of CO2 that we save via the saving of the food waste, and that was something that in my previous job, for example, that we used this conversion factor, and we also published figures also on our environmental impact. And just to explain what I did very recently, just last week, was indeed explain to our director, because there was the questioning from the executive committee of our federation, explain how I did previously research based mostly on the Fusions European project, where there I found some reliable general figures, how 1 ton of saved food waste can be converted into number of CO2 tons saved. And of course there's a lot of discussion possible and reflections to be done, but well, there is not much measuring to be done then additionally in every country. It's just more a general conversion factor that is used to calculate it into the environmental impact. And I think even if it's not the core mission of the food banks to be an environmental organization, well, I think that environmental impact is an asset that we have, and it becomes only more important because, well, you know, climate change is coming. The European Union puts massive of efforts and means into climate change, etc. So environmental impact, I think it's an opportunity to also express our added value there.
Okay, this is a very effective way of reasoning in a strategic way. For what are all these data for? Can you remember the picture with a frightened woman and so on? That's the point. Of course, it's a key topic. We have to translate it into useful, effective way what we have and measuring, and sometimes convert in different measures. That's the key. Please.
Yes, Marie from the Danish Food Bank.
Yes, thanks.
In Denmark, we also measure the CO2 emissions that we have or that we save, but we also look at social return on investment. And I don't know if that's something that all the food banks should look at equally like we do. But when we talked earlier about stakeholders, some of our corporate partners really like to know what is the food bank's actual social return on investment? What does it look like for us, both climate-wise but also social-wise? So they want to know what kind of organization are we and how do we measure ourselves?
And in this case, what are the indicators you are using for the moment?
The thing is, I'm not the one calculating it, so I don't know. We use an organization called Economics Without Borders, and they calculate everything for us. Also CO2-wise, they look at what type of food, how much CO2 goes into producing some certain type of cheese, for example, and how much CO2 goes into if you burn it instead of eat it, and so on. So they calculate everything down to the minimum product.
That's interesting. That's interesting. Can you have also? Do you have also the table in your hands? Can you have a glimpse on that? It's very small printed, but I hope it's sufficient to be read. You know that here, but Angela maybe is even more effective because she knows it very well how it is organized. We have the categories of food in the column, the first column, organized in families, we know, and then we have in this case the year 2016 and the year 2017. So at the end we have also delta, so difference in terms of performance, and then we have the quantities received and the quantities delivered, taking into account the different organizations. This is a metrics, I would say, crossing, of course, kilos, I suppose, and numbers in terms of items distributed, crossed with the categories of the organizations. And this is a mapping for the moment, which is important because we can see from one year to the other if there are some differences in terms of total quantities or categories of food collected and food redistributed. While in the other sheet, we can see the aggregation of this data in terms of food banks, food collected and delivered in general terms, so the very aggregated number, and financials. Here we have some indicators refers to economic impact, but we also have some data about human resources, how many people, and also on this topic we might discuss because how many people in which sense, what's the meaning, the number of people working for us, with us, in terms of what, hours, days, or simply number of people engaged. This might be a great difference, for example, when treating the data. And then the premises, the vehicles, and the handling equipment. And here we have some examples at the end of the sheet. So, thinking about the 4 areas, economic, environmental, nutritional, and social, we might identify at least, like a quiz, I make you a question. We might identify at least 2 areas, isn't that? Or even more. Yes, the microphone, please. Thank you. Okay.
So do you want to look at the ones we collect at the moment for the as-is?
Let's start from the moment.
For the as-is.
Correct.
So if we look at the economic, I suppose if we look at the economic, some of the things we collect are the cost, the operating costs of the food bank, the grants that we get, the donations, and our incomes and our expenses then. So, but I guess the challenge with that is maybe that that's only the economic operations of the food banks rather than expressing anything to do with the value of the food that we're delivering or necessarily the value for society, like the social return on investment. And again, you know, the carbon savings, the value of carbon saved. So I think that's very narrow, I guess, when we look at the as-is. The environmental piece, we've obviously just, we measure our tons of food, but as our Etienne has said, we don't measure the CO2 associated with it. In Ireland, we do a blanket conversion but it's, you know, I guess it's questionable at best. So I think the nutritional piece, probably looking at the analysis of the quantity of received and delivered food. The best video, as Jacques said, was we look at the different categories of food we get. But again, that's not necessarily going to give us a nutritional breakout, because you can have many foods which may not reflect the category of the food that would fit in. So like tinned food, I think, is a good example, because you can have tinned meat, but that could go under protein as well. So the nutritional value of the food may not be represented by the category. And I think from social, the one that we look at is maybe the charities and end beneficiaries saved. But I suppose we could also talk about the volunteers in terms of social impact. But I know in Ireland, for example, we don't measure end beneficiaries. We estimate how many we don't measure it directly. That's done. We ask the charities that we work with to provide an indication of how many people they work with. But again, so the accuracy of that. So I think in Ireland anyway, from an as-is basis, in terms of what we provide to FEBA, that would be an overview of how I would see those fit into the different categories.
And taking into account different contexts, maybe.
It's just a comment to what Emma said, because in Denmark we actually also look at economic-wise how much money the average beneficiary saves by getting food from the Danish Food Bank, and how much money is possibly going into something else at that organization. So we calculate that yearly. So we say that, okay, if they pay 10,000 a year, they in average get food at the amount worth of 100,000. Because we can see that on delivery basis, because we have the data for it. Yeah.
And what do you do with this data?
That's usually something we do when seeking funds, really, showing that what we do is actually really efficient. Yeah, what we do is actually really efficient. So that's a way for us to argue that the Danish Food Bank is necessary, really.
Does anybody else use this type of data? Yes. Yes. Good.
A lot of thoughts I have.
Great.
The first one is, I mean, how do we set the goals? And I can see two categories when we speak about measuring impact. One is the external, and the other one is the internal. In external is communication, fundraising. I mean, mostly fundraising, because communication is also mostly supporting fundraising. And if I look at the whole thing from the external point of view, I see, first of all, I think there are two sides. One is the environmental side, which is the climate and how much food waste, how much we can help the decreasing of food waste in terms of carbon dioxide footprint, because this is, I think, the most common measurement. And the other side is the social aspect, how much these foods can help the charities and the people we work with. That's already two different categories, the charities and the people. I think the environmental aspect can somehow be measured now in a simple way. How we do that, we know the volumes, and by knowing some kind of calculation methods, we can calculate the CO2 footprint. And my feeling is that currently this is enough for communication purposes. Okay. If we want to step forward and we would like to sell this CO2 footprint, then we need something much more concrete and complex. But I don't think we will solve that on our own. Then we will need external auditors who are in charge of doing this. So this is something probably step 2 or 3. For communication purposes, and I know a lot of people, discuss and debate whether this 1 kilogram equals 2.5 kilogram is true or not true. But to be honest, I mean, we could work years on that, and would probably not solve the problem because this is so complex. When we start digging, it will be just more and more complex. On the social side, this is again is not easy, and in my opinion, this is very much qualitative, because something we can say on the social side, for me this is not the economic part, but with how much in terms of euro value are we helping people, and then we can say we are helping X million euro or per capita or per recipient, and then we can say this is X% of the household income, or I mean we can somehow describe this from the data we have. In terms of the social inclusion aspect, which I think is the most important part of our work and impact, I don't really believe this can be data-based or quantitative data-based. I think it has to be qualitative-based, and even if it's not, you know, fully representative, this is where it comes, you know, if we speak about fundraising, then there is another term, the storytelling.
Yes, of
and
course.
I think with storytelling, we can much more sell the idea of the social impact rather than with data. I mean, if we would have, like, you know, 50 good stories of how the social impact is really happening at the side of the charities or the individuals, this is even more than saying X whatever.
Yes.
To be honest, I never felt, at least in Hungary, the value, I mean, the nutritional aspect. I mean, this social aspect is much more interesting. Whenever, I mean, when I speak to funders, if I speak to media or whoever I speak, the social aspect and the stories are much more important to them than the nutritional value in whatever calories or something. In terms of the economic value, yeah. I think the most important message, what we are telling, is the return on investment, meaning how much money we spend on saving food. Just one recent example, we are now discussing with the government to spend money on food donation, and they are asking, show us, I mean, if I give you €1, how much worth of food you will be saving? Is it 5, 10, 20, 30? Because this is the multiplication effect. Yes. And I think more and more funders will look for this multiplication effect. And I think this data is partly here because we know the value, we know the volumes, we know the value, but we don't know the costs, because even if there are numbers here, I think there is a large uncertainty of the numbers, because I think some federations are only including here the cost of the federations and not the cost of the food banks. And we are not speaking about the cost of the charities. So I think on the financial part, we should be hardly working on really showing, and I would be also interested not only as a fundraising or founder person, but also as a manager, and here I go to the other side, the internal knowledge, efficiency. I mean, number one efficiency for me, how do food banks spend their resources the most efficient way? And for this, we have only few information available, because the financial part is, I think, totally inconsistent, so we can't calculate anything on that today, and even there are problems if we look at internally, because me as a food bank manager, I would need much, I mean, deeper information in terms of having information and knowledge. For example, like the sourcing, I see now industry, distribution, and collection. Distribution, I understand. Collection, I understand. Industry, I understand, but don't have agriculture, don't have hospitality sector, for example, which I know they are, you know, something we're looking for, We don't see direct distribution, for example, so how much is centralized and how much is decentralized. So a lot of things which we speak about that are the future and are the key for efficiency, we don't have data to see. I mean, yeah, we should speak to our friends in, let's say, Spain or Portugal, because they are doing great in this, because they are growing year by year, whatever. Another thing, I would probably put some data which is not coming from the food banks, but like we never, I mean, we see these numbers here, but it would be interesting to see, let's say, per capita, how much is. I mean, we know that Germany is big or France is big, but it might be Luxembourg being a very good food bank because they are a small country. So the numbers in terms of the overall numbers are sometimes confusing when we see these reports on the PowerPoint, and we should normalize them with some external data. So that this is also a comment that probably some parts deeper information which is probably available, and extended or combined with some external data would help the efficiency. And I think in terms of the internal efficiency questions, we would need more detailed information than for the external world, because the external world is always simplified. Just few numbers for communication purposes are usually enough.
Maybe you want to add something about this last point, normalization of the data. I thank you very much. You raised so many key points, and I think they all deserve a discussion or reactions from us. And then I come soon to you, because I remember that you raised your hand. But maybe Fabio can add one word to the last point about normalization of the data. So it's important also for our digital platform. That's why I asked to anticipate, and I do apologize for
just a quick comment. I think that normalizing data by using external datasets is a great idea. It's something that is the horizon of the platform, so it's something that could be enabled by the technology that we are going to put on the table. I see some challenges, like being sure that different datasets are comparable, but still I see a lot of value in this approach. So it's something that we should keep in mind as a goal for the project.
Thank you. You wanted to? Thanks.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a few examples of the data that we started collecting, and I don't know if it will be suitable across the network, but it just might give you some ideas. So with regards to the economic impact, we're also looking into asking our charities directly how much they save and then what they invest the money in, to see the impact on the charities. And we're looking into calculating the value of the food as well. We had a really interesting debate internally around the nutritional value, because when you talk about better nutritional value, certain things, there is a common understanding and agreement on what is good, but in other cases you're putting a judgment on what is good nutrition. So for example, chocolate bars or really high sugary drinks might not be considered as a nutritional value item, but for charities that work with homeless people, it is an item that is kind of really required by them, because it's something that people can take with them and go away with it. It's something that they can give them before a meal. So it's kind of to be really careful when we talk about nutrition, to make sure that it might be different for the different types of charities that we're working with, and try and understand the complexity of that. I'm not sure about how you do that. And with regards to the social impact, we also, so obviously this is very aggregated data, and you have to get it from a number of different food banks, but I feel that it only touches on the surface of who we're working with and the numbers. What we started looking into is the impact of receiving food from us on the charities. So as an example, quite a lot of charities are saying that they wouldn't be able to run the service, or they would have to close. So it's not maybe a financial benefit for them, but they just would not be able to operate if they didn't receive the food from us. Try to understand the charities that we're working with a bit better. And I know it's very difficult to find categories that would be the same across different food banks, but one way would be geographical mapping and data, so to look into areas with high deprivation versus areas of low deprivation. And I don't know if there's a standard way of looking at sizes of charities. So in our case, we can see that a lot of them are very micro charities working on the ground. I don't know if that's data that's readily available. And I have a few other examples of it. It's mainly what we try to do is to get a better understanding of where our charities are located, who they're working with, and their size, so we can claim more about what we're doing, and then trying to understand where our limit is. So there is things that we have direct impact on, which is the charities in our case, but our impact on the beneficiaries, we're a bit more far removed, and therefore it's something that we contribute towards. It's not something that we impact directly. So our main focus is on the fact that we help the charities to reach their impact. So we have feedback that charities can feed more people, they can run more services. So in a way, we help them increase their impact within their specific area of expertise, which I think is how you move a little bit from just looking at kind of numbers to the outcome of what happens as a result of using the food bank. So those are just a few kind of things that we've been looking at recently.
Do you have any inputs also about the accuracy and reliability of the data charities provide you in order to fill in, for example, this file?
Well, this is the first time that we did this internally, going out to charities and try to collect information from them. And I think in comparison to what we had before, we just have to acknowledge the limitations. So it is based on a survey, it is based on their interpretation of the questions, and it's self-reporting, but we feel it's good enough for us to be able to learn from it and then move forward, versus it will be very difficult, and we will not have the capacity as a charity to investigate every bit of data that they give us. But one way of validating it is to add a qualitative layer on top of that and try to understand the stories behind the numbers. So that's the approach we've taken, is kind of good enough for evaluation.
Yes, of course. On the one hand, we need some quantitative data because they are faster, they are simpler to demonstrate something. But at the end, what is even more important is to show what you said, is to show what's the story behind. And I come back to our colleague from Hungary, who told us that best practices, storytelling might be even more inspiring in some specific situations. They are, of course, not an alternative, or they work together, providing a complete scenario of what we are, what we do, and so they are both useful and necessary for us. So it's important what you said. Thank you very much. Jacques.
Yes, I would like to to come back onto the interest of certain type of KPIs, and that I remember when long time ago when I was going to school and we had lessons in psychology. They were making differences between what we call the motivators and the satisfiers. And I think you need both to make the donkey go. And the motivator is the carrot, and the satisfier, or whatever, or the other way around, is is the kick in the backside. Okay, so I think likewise for the nutritional information, for example, it could be construed or considered as a satisfying information. It is good for us to say that we don't feed rubbish to the people, and therefore to expand a little bit. You don't need to go into too many details and make the difference between pork and beef and chicken and sheep. You know, you don't need to go that far. But you can say, okay, we give protein-rich food. We give food and fruit and vegetables. We give dairy products and the type of information that we are giving already. If you can, use that information and transform it into a cheese pie, giving this type of information, that would be satisfying. It's a satisfier.
And for example, I come to you back just as an example, if I understood well, as an infographic, might be like this for an adult. Or 1,500, okay, per day, and we can maybe represent this data in this way. We can provide for the moment, for days, this one, and for children, maybe we arrive till here. This might be a way to compare what is the reality and also to stress the gap, help us to fill in the rest, help us, and then to provide some details in terms of proteins and also carbohydrates and so on. Sugar.
Yeah.
Even to say how much to solve the problem about good or not good food.
But we need to remember, just to complicate the matrix a little bit, we need also to remember what could be motivator for the outside world could well be a satisfier for the inside world and vice versa.
Yes, yes.
So at the end of the day, we need everything we can get our hands on. And then it's how you, I hate the word, manipulate the data. That's how you actually present the data that will make a difference. I'm more concerned, if I just take the social side, I'm more concerned on how do we get reliable data. How do we get the age of the people that we help? If we don't do, or if countries don't allow you to ask for the age or the date of birth of the people you help, how can you get reliable data? That is a real concern to me. At this point in time in Belgium, I know that we in most cases, we just rely on what the association or the charities are telling us. But that's highly questionable. So this is really I think as far as the type of food we give and things like that, I think we more or less all are on the right track. But when it comes to the other KPIs, I think we have real problems on our hands. Real problems.
Just a small comment to what Jacques said, because that's actually really interesting, because in Denmark we often people ask us, so what does your food do for the end user, for the person on the street or whoever receives it? And we have to say we don't know that, because we cannot measure that correctly. So we say that our end user is the charity, because that's how far we know our food goes. And with certainty we can say that they get this and this and this, or whatever they get, and how much they get, and which types of food. But we cannot say with certainty who gets the food, who comes into the charity. Does that person come to 4 different charities? Does that person come to the same charity 4 times a day, or 4 times a month, or 4 times a year? We don't know that, because the people we're working with, or the end user, is someone that we cannot, in that sort of sense, track. So we usually say that our end user is the charity, because until that point we have reliable data.
And there are some differences in counting and measuring in an approximately way how many meals you are able to provide, to distribute. If you are approximating in terms of kilograms, half a kilo per meal, with or without drinks, for example, this might be a difference. And if it's more important to count down the total number of meals or the people benefiting them. So, because in some situations you distribute 1 meal per 1 person, while in others you distribute 2 or 3 meals in a week, in a month, to the same people, to the same person. So it might make a difference. What do you think about that, for example, in your concrete experience?
I think that question is...
Thank you. Okay.
We're in a very similar situation. I think accounting for beneficiaries in an accurate way is just not possible in our case. And also, even the information that we have about beneficiaries, we can never account that they are unique beneficiaries. So we have the people that the charity tells us, the number of people that interact with the charity, but whether they eat the food or not, we don't know. Whether they go to that charity and for other charities within the space of a week, it's something that we're not going to be able to track. So the reality, I don't think we're going to be able to get to that end user details. So we rely on kind of grouping and reporting by charities. So we use kind of top-level labels that are acceptable in the UK around what the charity does and the type of beneficiaries they work with. So we can have the categories, but not the exact number of end users. And I think it's quite difficult to get to in an accurate way.
So when we were talking about aging society or child poverty, it's not so simple to translate it as a concrete opportunity in terms of socio-demographic data we can collect.
You can say, so in our case, we would be able to say the number of charities that we support that say that they work within schools. That's data
for example, this might be a proxy.
Yeah.
Yes.
But not down to the one individual, but we will be able to say the number of charities who work with elderly people, the number of charities that work in certain areas, we are able to say.
This is good.
I have a question first from Radmila from Belgrade. She is the one of the persistent. Ciao Rado, persistent. She asked that because they deliver 80% fruits and vegetables from their donation, what is the matter of nutrition? Because the last users, they use this for the cooking and fruits for the kind of desserts or whatever. This is the question from Radmila. And the second, I think for environmental impact, is different type of food is different type of when you put on the landfill, if you put the landfill, produce different, I will say, CO2 in there, you know. Also the packages of the food, of the food products. If we go so detailed, I agree with Jacques, with so deep, with something which we are not administration, we are not agency for veterinary or some kind of department of ecology. Yes. I think we should keep on the slightly on some level where we can all, because we are not so developed as a food bank as UK or I don't know, Belgium or whatever. You should count on that. And doing this, we should have, I will not agree with that we don't need training for this. I think we should have dedicated person to this to do if we go so in detail. I agree with the lady from UK. We will measure how many consumers have our partners, like our charities, which we work with. The quantity of the food, maybe here it can be measured economic value, like because when we receive the donation, we have the invoice, the amount of food cost like this and this. And we know how much cost each donations, like from the donors. And that's why we know how much we can deliver to the charities, to the last consumers. Here I think it's a lot of, if you agree, for me it's, what Jacques says, we have enough of information now, maybe it can be improved. Yes, I don't know how, but just not go so deeply into this, I will say, maybe we can go step by step to see where we are. Because all departments in some ministries, they work on different issues, environment, social, economic. We are not, sorry, honestly.
Of course, the viability of the data collection must be also in economic sense, so it shouldn't cost too much time and too much effort from us, of course. This is rule number one, but as you told this morning, we would like to proceed step by step, improving what we already have. That is very much, for the moment, very well done. It's a very good starting point, be sure. Probably the quality of the data, or the information better, might be looked for also in crossing this data and in elaborating and in telling them in a different way. Graphical one, storytelling, dashboard and so on. We can start with this type of outcome and then see if we are interested in adding something new, something more, of course in a shared way. Otherwise, it's nonsense if only 1 or 2 or 5 food banks can provide this data and the others cannot. It's useless, because it's important to compare, to give context to the data, as we saw this morning. So,
or respect those developers and 8 or 10 or other 10, I would say, they cannot manage this fulfill and collection data. I think from the beginning we should start, this is a suggestion, slightly and one by one, just to go and to educate ourselves first, then others.
Fabio can end, and then we come to you. Thanks. Okay.
Under a technological perspective, I think that one of the challenges of the project will be understanding what does it mean step by step. I mean, because for sure I agree with Laura when you say that maybe the first step is porting this data collection on a new platform and gaining a better representation of the data that we already collect. Maybe linking to Jacques, we should and we could understand better the process that every partner follows in order to write a number here, you know. So a description of the way in which each partner fill the numbers of this sheet. And if we get this data, maybe we can normalize indicators across different countries, you know. Okay, I stop here for the moment, but it's very insightful. Yeah.
Yes, probably. Balázs?
Yes. I wanted to make a comment on measuring impact on the final recipients. And on one hand, I fully agree that it's on one hand hard to measure. On the other hand, we are not giving food to those people, but we are helping the charities who are doing their work. And that's true from an operational point of view. But if I look at from the external world and from a fundraising point of view, nobody gives us money to give food to charities. So if we would sell the food bank idea that we are there to help charities, we wouldn't get money. We are selling the idea that we are helping with food people in need. This is what we say.
Yes.
Yeah, and therefore, even if it is hard, I think we have to show some impact on the people. And I think we have to look at it that this is a network we are running, and those charities are part of the network. The suppliers are also, our donors are also part of the network. We are managing a channel where the donors are donating money. We are managing this food, and with the help of our charity partners, we send this food to people in need. And this is the idea what we are selling to the outside world. And I think we have to measure the impact on this one, even if physically we are not the ones who are giving the food to people. So we can't say from a measurement point of view that we don't with it because this is part of the charities. Then unfortunately we have to ask the charities to give us some information.
So the messages might be we are in touch with collaborate with a number of charities, and thanks to this collaboration, thanks to our, thanks to the fact that we exist and we do what we do, the people who benefit from our collaboration are numbered.
The simplified message is that we as food banks are helping a lot of people.
Yes.
With the help of the charities, yes, with the help of the charities. And also it has, we are doing a similar exercise now in Hungary. And this has also internal impacts on the efficiency, because we would like to work with charities that are more supporting our vision. We would like to give the food to charities where the food is more helping the social inclusion than in other cases. And we have, one very simple method now. We say we only give food to charities who are not only doing food distribution, but also have other social activities. But this question is of course much more complex than that. Yeah. And there are charities where the food has a much more, positive impact, and the multiplication effect is better. And from an internal perspective, there are a lot of questions. Just give you one simple question. Should we work with less charities and do a more focused, giving more food to less charities, or giving less food to more charities? And we need to have the answers from here to have this question answered. Because if I look at the system, like for example in the UK, you work with like more than 3,000 charities, I guess. Over 10,000 charities, with a similar amount what we distribute in Hungary, and in Hungary we work with 300 charities. So which one is more efficient? Which one is better? We don't know the answer, and I think we should look for the answer from the data.
Good point. Yes, please.
Yes, just a remark to that, because I think we decided in Denmark not to use a quantitative method in trying to figure out what the beneficiaries, the end user, gets out of our food. Instead, we use a qualitative approach where we actually interview and ask and send out surveys and so on to the different charities. And then just a small remark to the last one. We deliver food in Denmark to a lot of different charities, and some of them are like crisis centers for women, for example. And some crisis centers only have room for 5 women with one child each. But then again, we deliver out also to homeless shelters that have the capacity of feeding 200 people a day. So in that amount, it's really difficult saying, okay, which one is the most efficient, because one is a crisis center for women that has a rooms for 5 women, and one is a homeless shelter with 4 storages with up to 200 people staying there. So it's difficult saying one is more efficient than the other, because one is clearly in need of much more food than the other. Yeah.
And so you tell stories, you provide examples?
Yes.
Yes.
Anything.
Go on, upstairs. The microphone, please. Okay. Is there anybody else? Maybe Fabio. Thank you.
This is something that I'm thinking about. I've been thinking about for a while. So, in your opinion, could be helpful if in the platform we add a part, a survey tool that helps you to ask questions to charities, will be used by charities in order to collect this qualitative data. You know, you can make a question to a charity, and they can answer through the platform, and then we can analyze data inside the platform and make sense of qualitative data. Jacques, no?
No? Yes, no? Why?
I'm going to tell you a little story.
Because in Italy we have an experience with this, and I know some things.
I'll tell you a little story. In Belgium, we developed a platform that's called Food IT, on which, and the idea was to have on the same platform all the aspects of management of a food bank, including the management of charities, and for the charities to have access to the same platform and to manage the beneficiaries on that, and then to calculate the age groups and everything automatically. Well, it works in one food bank out of 9. Why? Because the food banks are not always motivated to make the effort, and the reason why they are not motivated to make the effort is because they believe that the charities are complete monkeys and they are not capable of doing the job that is required. Now, I must probably be living somehow on planet Mars, you know, because in my food bank, all the charities do the job very, very well. So I think it's just a matter of leadership and making things happen. And I think if we can motivate the charities and show them what they get back from their effort, they get more food if they don't blow up the number of beneficiaries. They get more food. If they get better food because we know what our clients are. If they tell me every year I have 250 beneficiaries and I don't know the age groups and I don't know how many babies there are and I don't know anything, I will just, you know, give Coca-Cola for everyone. But if I know what the age groups are, I can better serve them. And so it's a question of teaching them what to do and what they can get as a result of their cooperation in that respect. I believe it is feasible. It's a matter of leadership.
In my opinion to that, if the charities are supposed to have access to the platform and fill in data, I don't think it's going to happen, because they are as much in a hurry as we are, if not more. But if it's a question of the platform providing a survey to send out, yeah, I think it's going to be much easier.
No, this was
okay.
My
good. Yes.
Can I ask that? I think that no one answered your question, because I think charities are extremely busy and often volunteer run. And we said, you know, we talked about the being understaffed earlier, and what we do is only one part of a service that they deliver in a lot of instances. Collecting data, as you'll know from charities, is difficult. Every survey that you get, it doesn't matter who it's to, it doesn't matter if it's the charity sector or who, that the response rate in surveys is very low. the challenge with surveys is that, and I know from talking to fair shares, that you will have specific questions to fair shares, and they may satisfy grants that you've gotten. Same way to us, we may have testimonials that we're looking for. So if you're doing a charity survey, I think from what we've learned, the rules are a little, are like, yeah, do it like, sorry, not little and often, but like, it's you get kind of once a year to go out to people and ask them for information. And when you do that, it needs to meet all your needs. So we spend ages designing our charity survey so that we can analyse it, so that it includes all the questions we have. If we were to put something through this platform, it would need to take into account then all of the other surveys that we would need to run. Then you'd be managing surveys not only across all of the FEBA network, but also the food banks within the FEBA network that might have individuals that they want to ask. So I think that then makes your platform quite complex. I think as well, just going back to Balázs's point, it's very interesting what you were saying, Balázs, about the being able to compare efficiencies. I think that's going to be extremely difficult because, for example, delegated distribution, if we look at the UK versus Hungary, the volume of food that you'll get in a store in the UK is about 1/10 of the size of what you get in Hungary. So the number of charities that you need to cover the estate is much bigger. So if you're looking at how many charities you serve versus how much food you're giving them, it's very difficult to compare like with like in that instance. And there's not very much that you can, that you can do in that instance, I think, to say is one more efficient than the other.
I wouldn't say it's an evaluatory efficiency measuring, but if we look at we see the differences, then we can go and see and ask questions and understand and get the knowledge. So I think data is not always giving you the evaluation. So I don't want to evaluate efficiency per kilogram per charity. But if I see the numbers and you put it in a context, for example, one is a homeless shelter, the other one is another type of organization, and then you put in more information, then you can get the knowledge. So or at least, we can start talking with the colleagues in the UK, which we did, by the way, when we found out this big difference, and we started to talk, and we understood the difference, and we got a lot of knowledge out of it. For example, why freezing does work in the UK and wouldn't work in Hungary. So, and just by looking, this is a difference in data. There should be something to discuss. So, I'm not looking for always, numbers saying this is better because the number is higher and this is worse because the number is lower. But the numbers can, in many cases, point to points of interest where you can start talking and get the other type of knowledge.
Questo è un punto chiave.
What you mean is that we don't need a tool only that does the benchmarking, but it would be good also to do the bench learning out of it via discussion,
Nice.
etc.
Nice.
I had some small remarks that I wanted to make.
Yes.
One is we say the nutritional value is difficult to calculate or to communicate. What is healthy food? That's a topic for discussion always. But in Belgium we have the food pyramid. I don't know if it's in all countries. And I think what would be a good indicator is at least if we could, on one way or another, minimize the number of food from the rest group that we distribute. And at this moment, I think the categories that we use, I can see that biscuits and cookies are together with pasta and rice, or water is together with lemonades, etc. So you can't there get out what is healthy food and what is rest group. So there is maybe still improvement possible in the measuring. Another thing that I wanted to say is it's a sensitive thing in Belgium where we are now careful for. You can correct me. But I understood that if we talk about the figures, yes. For example, in the number of beneficiaries, it's important to stress that it's not only done by the food banks or by the 300 volunteers of the Belgian food banks, but also to mention the thousands of volunteers that are working in the member associations. And so to be, if you speak about results and KPIs, also think about other parties, the member associations and other third parties, maybe municipalities or I don't know what, who also are contributing to this result, and take them also in account in your communication. And the last thing I wanted to ask, it's a question.
That is when food banks help municipalities. That's what you want to make out. I just want to make sure that I just want to make sure that we are on the same wavelength. What you are saying, if I understand well, is that we should take into the data the activities of the charities, including those eventual public authorities that are helped by food banks? Or do you want to take also charitable activities and feeding activities done by public authorities without the interference of food banking?
My main thing I wanted to say is that for example, it's if we talk about the number of people that we have, the number of beneficiaries that we have helped, and we combine this only with the number of volunteers that work at the regional, provincial food banks, it's also with the help of the thousands of volunteers that work in the associations, in the charities.
I don't agree with those numbers.
Okay, but that's...
I don't agree. No, let me explain why. I think it's an important example, and it's not to say something is right or something is wrong. It's just to say why I tend to differ. Basically, what is said there is that the Belgian Federation helped 321,000 persons. Now, actually, the persons that are helped by the charities that are recognized by the Belgian Federation of Food Banks is 170,000. The balance is actually helped by the public authorities, and the only intervention of the food banks is to supply the FEAD products to those public authorities. So they only play a logistical role in terms of receiving food from the central purchasing and supplying, but they don't manage them, they don't advise them, they don't interfere in which way it is, and therefore for me that is blowing up. Sorry to say, it's blowing up the numbers. It makes no sense. For me, food banking is more than just transporting food from A to B. It is having an interaction with the charities and so on and so forth. And that's why I'm not particularly fond of these numbers. Okay, but so I explain why the difference. Okay. Now, I'm not sure that FEBA should actually take into consideration this type of number. It's a matter for discussion.
But
yes, of course.
that figure was not the point that I wanted to make. It was just to say, even for the 160,000 people or 170,000 now in Belgium, it's they are helped thanks to the volunteers of the food banks, the 300 volunteers, but also thanks to these hundreds of charities and thousands of their volunteers. And that's a sensitive thing for the charities. For example, the large charities, that they are also recognized in our communication, that it's not as if we have done.
Ah, okay. Communication si può fare tutto.
I understand. Yeah, it is a sensitive issue because food bankers, quite rightly, they refer to the number of people helped by the charities, which is normal, and the charities, they have a problem with food banks doing that because they say, we do the job. You supply us, but we do the job. We are interfacing with the beneficiaries. And you walk away with all the sponsoring and things like that because you say that you are helping so many people. And where are we now in this picture? And so I think it is a sensitive issue, and I think we should all, wherever, be very careful and always recognize the work that is being done by the charities, because without their work, ours would mean zero, nothing.
I'm Lilja Food Bank Belgrade. Thank you very much. I completely new and I learn all day. And sorry for my English, but I would like to say what is for me KPA. I would like to now know how much benefiters need our helps in my country. And I know that 300,000 people is hungry in my country, and 1 million exist on the border. And I would like now what type of food they need, priority, and after that we make a plan for that quantity, and I'm sure that we find donation for critical food for that people, and that plan will be our goal for first year, for second year, for third year. And I think we make a plan. After that, we make goals for next year. And we are small and start with reorganization, and I hope one day we can talk about all of that.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Good luck. Thanks to you. Thanks for your contribution. I think that yes, now it's time to just to respect the schedule. I thank you very much. I would like to ask you before our last break to make this very small effort. I will distribute 2 colors. Green, something like that, and red, something like that color. I ask you to use per person 1 green piece of paper and 1 red piece of paper, and write down, in your opinion, what are the, let's say so, 3 major opportunities you can imagine in doing what we are doing in this project. While here, the 3 main threats, or I would say bottlenecks, you are experiencing in your daily life. This might be quite important for us. And while you will take your break, we will try to summarize and to organize a wrap-up, the last moment of our discussion. So thank you very much for the inspiring interaction.